Seattle loves the Mariners. I mean, look, the city loves all of its professional sports teams, but I think the Mariners and baseball has a special place in the hearts of those in the Emerald City. All they really want, though, is a World Series victory. Hell, even a World Series appearance would be cool at this point. After 18 years of false dawns, aimless rebuilds, and a comical lack of power. Seriously, Russell Branyan led the Mariners in home runs with 15 in 2010, and he only played 57 games. 2022 appeared to be a turning point. Seattle qualified for the postseason for the first time in 20 years. Not only that, but they won a wildcard series to boot. Now, it was not pretty. The M's were 10 games under 500 in mid-June and rode a 14-game winning streak in July into contention. There was a genuine buzz around the franchise. They had Julio Rodríguez, there was a stable of young arms coming through to the Major League Ball Club. It just created this sense of excitement not seen or felt in Seattle since the days of Ken Griffey Jr. and Alex Rodriguez. Yet the team has regressed as ownership refuses to invest in upgrades. The foundation for something special is there. Instead of building upon this, instead of developing the team into a true contender, the Seattle Mariners ownership, headed by John Stanton, has opted to line their own pockets instead. And make no mistake about this, the M's are a cash cow. There is now a movement happening in the Pacific Northwest. Fans are starting to rally against the fairly mysterious and completely awful First Avenue Entertainment, which owns 90% of the franchise. Most local media outlets and personnel do not want to touch this issue for fear of losing access, but make no mistake, Seattle Mariners fans are fighting back against what happens to be the most low-key, terrible ownership in all of baseball.
They said, go back the other way, we'll stop and eat it. Dicks is the place where the cool hang out.
Around the same time Sir Mix-a-Lot was cruising Broadway and repping Dick's Drive-In, the Seattle Mariners ownership was nothing but another whack crew. In many ways, what is happening right now in Oakland could have easily happened to Seattle some 30-ish years earlier. An apathetic owner quick to blame fans for the team's own shortcomings tries to uproot the franchise and move them to a smaller, less viable market, thanks in large part to some shady backroom dealings happening within Major League Baseball. It's a familiar story. The players may have different names, but the plot is the same, albeit with a different outcome. Whereas John Fisher has been allowed to successfully dislodge the A's from Oakland, Jeff Smulyan, with an assist from David Letterman, was not able to remove the Mariners from Seattle and take them to Tampa. I'm not going to delve into the full story of how the Mariners remained in Seattle because it is very complex, but here's the Cliff Notes version. Smulyan did not conduct any real due diligence on the terms of an agreement that required a local buyer be given an opportunity to purchase the Mariners for $100 million. He thought it was not applicable and that he could sell to buyers wanting to relocate the team elsewhere. Local lawyer Art Harrigan successfully argued that was incorrect. The city of Seattle was given plenty of time to locate a local buyer. Eventually, Nintendo of America stepped up and added the baseball club to its portfolio. Smulyan was disposed of faster than a Koopa Trooper shell, and mostly things improved in the short term. Over the long term, however, well, Nintendo's ownership was complicated. There were certainly moments, but it was an uneasy relationship. They helped get Safeco, or what is now T-Mobile Park, built, but they could have put in more of their own money instead of relying so heavily on public funds. Especially considering the public voted against financing a new baseball stadium, and King County basically went behind everyone's backs figuring out a different way to secure taxpayer dollars. The stadium did get built, but people didn't exactly appreciate how Nintendo and King County went about things. At the conclusion of the 2002 season, in which Seattle won 93 games, manager Lou Piniella left because he felt management was more interested in making money than winning. A prophetic statement that has rang true in the more than 20 years since he left Seattle. In many ways, T-Mobile Park has been a blessing and a curse for the franchise. It is an amazing ballpark that makes folks want to come out and see the Mariners play during the summer. But it's also so lucrative that the team is able to rake in huge amounts of money, even with middle-of-the-road attendance figures. From the records I can find, the organization has only lost money during 2 seasons since moving into the new stadium. There was 2020 when every baseball team in America lost money, and then you have 2008 when a truly abject team lost 101 games and turned off even the most diehard M's fans. Even then though, the Mariners only lost about $4.5 million. Most years, the Mariners turn a very healthy profit, and in recent times, things have been supercharged. Seattle had the highest profit in all of baseball during 2022. This is not an ownership group hurting for cash or struggling. It also has no problems enriching itself by lying directly to fans' faces. When Nintendo was finally ready to sell the Mariners, they did not have to look far to find a buyer. The club's 17 minority owners came together to buy out 45% of the gaming giant stake, which gave them 90% of the team. Nintendo retained a 10% share in the ball club. Dubbed First Avenue Entertainment, the minority owners were headed by John Stanton, who made a fortune in wireless technologies during the 1980s and 90s. Former Microsoft executive and recluse Chris Larson owns a noticeable chunk as well. The only real thing he's done of note since leaving the software giant, though, is to avoid paying King County property taxes by using his wealth to exploit loopholes. Lifestyles of the rich and faceless, you gotta love it. During the new ownership group's introductory press conference, though, there was one statement from Stanton that's always stood out to me. My goal and the goal of the entire Mariners ownership and management team is to win a World Series. I believe that the Mariners are well positioned to achieve that goal. 6.5 seasons and one measly postseason appearance later, you have to question if that was truly the end goal of this ownership group. It was later revealed in a GeekWire puff piece on Stanton and his ownership of the Mariners that every single ownership group meeting starts off with a slide featuring this mantra: "We are dedicated to winning championships, creating unforgettable experiences for our fans, and serving our communities." It was not noted if that slide was followed by another one simply with the letters LOL on it. We'll get to those first 2 points in a bit, but I really want to focus in on that third statement. Serving our communities. One of the first orders of business for the new owners was to extend the lease at what was then known as Safeco Field. This is, after all, one of Major League Baseball's best facilities, truly a cathedral in every sense of the word. While some work was needed, some improvement and upkeep was required, it was mostly seen as a formality. After all, this was an ownership group that cared about serving the community. What proceeded to happen was an unnecessarily clunky and very public mess where Seattle ownership announced a new lease that they never actually signed, browbeat local officials into giving them public funds in order to sign it, and made some veiled threats about the future of the team. If you're interested in learning more about this entire ordeal, I will put some links in the video description, but here is a long story short. One of the things used to help build Safeco Field back in the day was a hotel-motel tax, which expired in 2020. The team wanted to keep using money from that tax beyond 2020 to fund stadium things. Some folks on the city council felt those funds would be better served helping the community through affordable housing. The Mariners responded with, "We help the community too, now give us that tax money or else." It later was revealed that the Mariners received an absolute sweetheart deal on their lease extension. The terms of this only served to annoy folks even further. Eventually, the city got some token concessions from Mariners ownership, and a lease extension was signed off on. It was a contentious saga, unnecessarily contentious, that certainly wasn't befitting for this organization that claims to be here to serve the community. This lease negotiation was also in stark contrast to what the Seattle Kraken was doing around the same time, with their owners in the midst of finalizing a $700 million renovation deal for Key Arena using no public funds. At least on the field, there seemed to be some optimism. The Mariners won 89 games in 2018, and with a few smart additions, the belief was they could finally end that playoff drought. Instead, they went in the opposite direction. All-star closer Edwin Diaz was traded so the Mariners could offload Robinson Cano's onerous contract. The team's best pitcher, James Paxton, and Gene Sakura, a 2018 All-Star, were also shipped out. You could have made a case for all of those trades at the time, and in hindsight, these deals have mostly ended up being irrelevant. But for Seattle Mariners fans just wanting success, it was truly a gut punch, especially considering what those running the team had just dragged the city through in terms of lease negotiations. That roster gutting was carried out by none other than Jerry Dipoto. In many ways, Stanton and Seattle Mariners ownership have found the perfect henchman to carry out their bidding. A man who will seemingly do all kinds of stuff without really doing anything at all. Jerry Dipoto is Mr. Cha-Cha Slide, a man who will move sideways in the most unnecessarily flamboyant way possible. It makes it seem as if the team is rebuilding or building or doing something, but really, they're not accomplishing anything. They're not getting better, they're not getting worse, they're just finding new ways to not spend money, which is exactly what Stan and Im's owners want. Here's the deal, Dipoto thinks he is 2 lateral transactions away from unlocking a baseball paradigm shift that will see him hailed as the forward-thinking executive he's always wanted to be. Dipoto doesn't really care about building a winning baseball team. What he's really hoping to do is build the team, build the roster that sees him be cast as lead man in Moneyball 2, Cheap Owner Boogaloo. In reality, Dipoto just continues to assemble rosters that do a few things well, a few things really poorly, and hope the random nature of baseball will break in the team's favor. Look, as far as drafting and developing talent, the Mariners have certainly had some hits in that regard. They've had some notable misses as well, but that is the nature of baseball. I think everyone can see that there is a foundation for a contender now playing at T-Mobile Park. It just needs some strategic investment. That's the thing, no one is expecting Mariners ownership to spend a bunch of money like Steve Cohen, but in the AL West alone, you've seen the Houston Astros and Texas Rangers both win World Series by building up a young core of solid players, then invest in key areas to take that roster to the next level. Seattle just simply refuses to do this. Dipoto, meanwhile, is happy spitting out some empty platitudes to justify the franchise's thriftiness. Let's not forget when he spit out this gem towards the end of a wildly disappointing 2023 campaign. We're actually doing the fan base a favor in asking for their patience to win the World Series while we continue to build a sustainably good roster. Dude, how long have you been in charge? At some point, the rebuilding ends, the building of that sustainable roster ends, and you are actually good consistently. You haven't even come close to reaching that point. Basically, this was just a cover story for another Mariners offseason of inaction. Stan's new move is to carry on and on about the uncertainty of regional television in the future and how it will impact Root Sports, the network it owns. To that end, Seattle ended up reducing its salary obligations for the 2024 season and finds itself sitting in the bottom half of the MLB payroll rankings. Meanwhile, Dipoto, Stanton, Mariners ownership continue to babble on and on about how they think this team, as constructed, is capable of winning, despite the fact everyone can see it has massive flaws and needs help. Look, could they win the AL West this season? Sure, baseball throws out random results all the time, but it is almost as if the entire Mariners ownership group thinks fans cannot see what happened with the Texas Rangers, an AL West rival, last season. Those Rangers focused on building their farm system, got a bunch of young talent in, and then as those players started to matriculate up to the major league level, they realized, hey, you know what? These guys are pretty good. Let's invest in the team, let's take it to the next level, and let's compete for a championship, which they won in 2023. Stan insists he wants the Mariners to compete for World Series, but eventually you gotta take action to do that. Otherwise, you're just saying words for the sake of saying words. On the surface, people may see the MLB ownership situations in Oakland and Seattle as entirely different causes. In reality, though, these fan bases are fighting back against different forms of the same thing: lies from terrible owners who do not care about baseball. Fisher and Stanton have continually lied to fans, to the media, to everyone who will listen to them while profiting off baseball. They are more than happy to accept cash from fans, rake in that dough. But when it comes time for them to live up to their end of the bargain and invest, whether that be in the form of a new stadium construction or roster construction, they just do not deliver. It's empty promise after empty promise after empty promise. When people hear Oakland A's fans chant sell the team, or when people go on social media and see Seattle Mariners fans demanding Stanton sell that franchise, it has nothing to do with baseball. It's all about dishonesty. It's all about these owners not fulfilling their commitments to the community. The same community that spends their hard-earned money and valuable time rooting for these teams. No one told John Fisher to say he was committed to Oakland. No one told John Stanton to say his goal was for the Mariners to win a World Series. They offered up those promises to fans of their own volition. Had they come out and claimed they were only interested in owning their respective baseball franchises in order to enrich themselves and other owners, no one would be demanding they sell their teams. Of course, fans would have long since abandoned those sides. Look, T-Mobile Park is nice, but who gives a shit if the end result isn't about wins, isn't about success, but simply about making those who already have a ton of money even more money? It's really hard to say where things end up in Seattle. It is very unlikely this terrible ownership group wants to give up their golden goose, and we know MLB isn't worried about bad publicity. That means the only real loser here are those who care most about the Seattle Mariners. Either they have to stop supporting a team that they love playing in a ballpark that they helped finance, or they simply have to accept the fact that those running the organization do not care if it ever competes at a high level. It seems particularly unfair to do that to a fan base that spent 4 years trying to will Dustin Ackley into being a thing. A fan base that has watched the Florida Marlins, Colorado Rockies, Arizona Diamondbacks, and Tampa Bay Rays all reach a World Series before they have. Every other team in the current incarnation of the American League West has won the World Series at least once since the Seattle Mariners entered the league way back in 1977. Fans in the Pacific Northwest are not asking John Stanton and the First Avenue Entertainment 17, those other owners, to bankrupt themselves or to spend beyond their means. They are simply asking for them to invest in the team the same way they have over the years. And if they cannot do that, at the very least, they should be honest with their true intentions. If they cannot do that, if they simply cannot be honest with fans, then they should sell the team, because those who support the Seattle Mariners deserve a hell of a lot better than the terrible ownership they are suffering through right now. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know more about what happens when Major League Baseball owners do get a new stadium, spoiler alert, they almost always cash out, videos in the upper right hand corner of your screen. And to hear about the legendary tale of the steroid air pitcher who posted some of the most inexplicable numbers ever, video lower right hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback. I seriously hope the Mariners are good one day. And as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.
My posse's on Broadway.